All right, join us on the program right now. The Washington Times. John Solomon is with us. John, thank you, sir, for your time this afternoon.
Oh, a pleasure to be with you.
All right, so we talked with Audrey Hudson last week, the former reporter for the Washington Times, who had her home raided in a search for firearms that apparently weren't there. Actually, search for a spud gun, I guess, a potato pellet gun. And then some notes were seized relating to a story that Audrey had been working on, a series that Audrey had done on the Federal Air Marshal Program. And apparently these notes and material have not been returned to Audrey yet?
Well, she's gotten copies of them back, finally. She didn't even know they had taken them during the raid because they weren't covered by the search warrant. And it was only when they began returning some of the materials they had seized from her home that she discovered they had gone into her desk and lifted these documents that were part of an investigation of the air marshals that the Washington Times published an award-winning series, in fact, back in the early 2000s. And so we only learned, and she only learned a few weeks ago, that was some of the items they took from her home. They've been returned to her. However, in the interim, they were shared with the Homeland Security Department. This was a Maryland State Police investigation. They were shared with the Homeland Security Department and exploited and reviewed by them before they were sent back to her. And so the government technically still possesses all the information they derived from those documents. And it's our belief that that's an infringement on both the First and Fourth Amendment, and that the government has an obligation to purge from its system anything it gleaned from documents it wrongfully obtained.
And so what legal recourse is the Times pursuing here?
We're looking at several options to go to court, and it could be a lawsuit, could be a motion, depending which route we go, that would ask the Homeland Security Department to return all information it gleaned from these documents as a starting point. It doesn't have the right to possess notes and information about who Audrey had interviewed or talked to and where she got her documents from. And so that part of the process is the first thing. From there are remedies and penalties that potentially courts can order. From our perspective, the first and most important thing is if the government obtained information about her sources or her reporting methods, that they be no longer allowed to use that and to relinquish it from their system, get it out of their systems, and technically that's returning the information, but it really means is that they can't act on the information they got. And so we want to start there, and then there are Fourth and First Amendment claims that could stretch out for a period of time, and we'll look at those when the time comes.
You know, John, there have been a number of stories that have come out recently, relatively recently, about the administration's war on whistleblowers,
Right.
their war on leaks. Is it your impression that that perhaps the administration was looking for information about who had cooperated with Audrey Hudson on these stories?
You know, it's hard to know yet. I always like to stay as a reporter inside the facts we know. So here's what we do know. We do know that when the Maryland State Police entered the home, they were accompanied by a Coast Guard agent. That agent works for the Homeland Security Department because Coast Guard's part of it. The Coast Guard agent asked Audrey, by Audrey's account, that, whether she was the Audrey Hudson who had written all the stories about the air marshals, and he said he had been a former air marshal, so he seemed to be familiar with the stories that she had written. And then she discovers afterwards that agent in the Maryland State Police seized documents about those stories, which had absolutely nothing to do with the potato launcher they had come to investigate as part of the warrant. Whether they targeted it beforehand or just spontaneously decided once they got to the house and realized they had the Audrey Hudson that they should grab the documents is really irrelevant. At the end of the day, just taking the documents under any circumstance, since they weren't covered by the warrant, is an intrusion on the First Amendment and the Fourth Amendment. I think right now, the factual basis, we do know all that occurred. We will, in the process of learning more, try to find out whether the Homeland Security Department tried to use this intentionally. So right now, there's no evidence to that, and until we see otherwise, we shouldn't. We're not going to put too much conjecture out there. But you raise a bigger question. You said this environment of being hostile to the First Amendment and to reporting into a free press. Our founding fathers clearly cared about that. And a decade ago, I was one of the very first reporters to go through this ringer. First, the Justice Department took my home phone records. Mary Jo White, now the SEC chairwoman for President Obama, was a U.S. attorney. She subpoenaed my home records to try to figure out what sources I was talking to. And then a year later, the FBI seized my mail without a warrant and eventually apologized and returned my email. But after that episode, which was really one of the first big media battles in a long time, the government said they were putting all these new protections in to safeguard the First Amendment and a free press and make sure they didn't step the bounds. And yet 10 years later, it seems like they're more emboldened than ever. And I think that may be the biggest outcome of this case, which is that people in the government and in these agencies seem emboldened to go after reporters. There doesn't seem to be a prohibition anymore.
All right. Well, listen, John, I appreciate you coming on the program, sir, and I hope we can talk again very soon.
Sounds great. Appreciate your attention to the story.
Yeah, absolutely. John Solomon joined us of the Washington Times.